Good morning. If everyone would get settled in, that would be wonderful. My name is Judy Howe. I'm the co-president of the League of Women Voters of Citrus County, and I want to welcome everybody here today. This is like my first time to really bring the meeting to order, so bear with me. As has been said before, we probably should be calling ourselves, instead of the League of Women Voters, the League of People Who Promote Democracy. Yes. And that's what we'd like to be thought of. Our goals are to register eligible voters, to educate the public on current issues and laws, to promote participation in democracy, and be informed and vote. To shine a light on government, local, regional, and Florida. We partner with other community groups to accomplish these goals. The League does not endorse candidates, but does hold public forums so that voters can get their questions answered if they have any. If you are here, you know the new time and the place. It's here, 10 o'clock. And it's second Tuesday at 10 o'clock at this library. Our next meeting, if you want to make a note, is June the 13th, which will be a Tuesday. Now, I'd like to hear from anyone present. If
you can't hear.
Can you not hear?
Judy, the mic went off as soon as you started.
It's on. It's on. Just have to put your mouth close.
Okay, I'm closer.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything you'd like me to repeat? Did everybody hear what we stand for and our goals?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. How many of you have heard about our meeting through, say, the Chronicle? Raise your hand. Ah, great. How about by email? Ah, Linda. And how about from friends? I know I always hear it from my friends. Now, today, we are very honored to have a special speaker today. And I'm sure most of you have read about it in the newspaper. Our speaker today is Superintendent Sam Himmel. And I'd like to just read a brief biography about Sam. Sandra Sam Himmel, we call her Sam, has served as superintendent of Citrus County Schools for the last 18 years. Sam started her professional career teaching at the Crystal River Middle School in 1977, can you believe it? And expanded her studies, earning her master's in organizational management. She managed a local business prior to her decision to become a school board member for Citrus County Schools in 1996. After 8 years serving as a school board member, Sam was elected superintendent of schools, where she had the honor of leading one of the best school districts in Florida. Over 15,000 students attend Citrus County's elementary, middle, and high schools. Sam believes in the importance of providing specialized and unique opportunities beyond core instructions to meet individual needs. She ensures Citrus County Schools that they offer multiple options for college and career readiness for all students. Sam has earned numerous recognitions, such as Florida's 2020 Superintendent of the Year, the Laban Dukes District Data Leader Award in 2014, and was appointed to serve by the governor on the Children and Youth Cabinet for the state of Florida. She currently serves on the Florida League of International Baccalaureate Schools and serves on the Florida Association of District School Superintendents Leadership Board after serving as the president. After that wonderful biography, I'd like to introduce Sam Himmel.
Well, good morning, and it's always a pleasure and an honor to come out and speak to groups because we love to share about Citrus County schools. I brought a couple extra speakers with me today because I know there's a couple really hot topics out there, such as the book adoption, books we have in the classroom, and also safety, which is always our #1 priority. Before we get started, I had a few questions handed to me this morning. I just want to share a couple highlights about our students because everybody wants to hear about the kids, because I don't know how many times you've heard kids can't read and write, kids can't do cursive. We do teach cursive, and I will tell you the difference between what happened when we were in school and the kids today. Our kids today are taught cursive all the way through school. It's not a separate subject like it was when we were in school, but it is taught. And I'll tell you, my first grader came home one day and she was trying to write her name in cursive. So I even know him first. That's my granddaughter. I don't have one that young, thank the Lord. I get to send that one back sometimes. But so I do know it's happening in the schools, and it's not because it's a superintendent's granddaughter. It happens across the district. So last night we started our award ceremony, and I would like to share with you that, we have the Merit Scholar Awards that go through the nation. There's over 1.5 million students tested across the nation. We have students who have, a couple of our students have earned the award of being in the top 3%. And we've got 2 students who have also finished in the top 1% of the nation. And that's out of 1.5 million students. So a lot of great things going on in the school system. I want to go ahead and hit a couple of the hot topics, and then we're going to open up for questions because I know everybody's got questions or you've heard things, and we want to be able to answer that and clarify that today. I know our first big hot topic is the book adoption. I brought Dr. Hebert, if he'd come on up. Dr. Scott Hebert, as of July 1, will be one of our new assistant superintendents. He's been with the district for, I think, 100 years. I can't remember. But we have a really good process on book adoption. We've got a great process when parents want to file a complaint or concern about a textbook. I will tell you that I believe our libraries and our classroom libraries and the books that we adopted have probably had a better process than most districts across the state. There are textbooks I have seen taken out of libraries across the state that you would not want your child or grandchild to look at K to 12. It wouldn't matter what grade level. And we've made sure that those books are not in our libraries, but Dr. Hebert can go through the entire process. And if we've got questions about that, then we can pause at that time.
So just to clarify, first of all, I'm glad y'all are here today to hear some of what you have to share about our school district. We have always in Citrus County, reading and literacy is very important. You may have read and hear from other counties where they do not have media specialists. There are some districts that have removed media specialists for whatever reasons, budget reasons or other reasons, so they don't have someone on staff or in the district to help go through that process. We have never done that. Our school board, our superintendent, we believe having a media specialist at every school, having a district team to be able to collaborate and support literacy and reading has been a #1 priority in the district. So know that we've always had that in place. Our media specialists that are our schools have all been trained on how to look at books and review books. What has occurred recently is that the state has said, okay, now we want to put some guidelines in place. Part of it, and I don't know the rationale, so I'm just kidding. This is not like, don't write to the Chronicle and say Scott said this, but it could be that other districts didn't have media specialists and felt like, well, we want to make sure there's a media specialist there to support literacy. That could be the reason. I don't know that. I know we've had that in place here in Citrus County. So what they've done is they've said, now we want to make sure that age appropriate books are in the media specialists or media centers and in the school libraries. You've probably seen anybody on Facebook in here or Twitter, any of that, Instagram. So you know that in some of those, you see pictures where they have a library or books and they've covered them up. You will not see that in Citrus County schools. I know I've been out at the schools. None of our teachers, none of our schools have done that. Other districts may have. I can't speak for that, but I know we have not done. Yes, ma'am.
What type of qualifications does the media specialist have? Like a librarian and teacher.
They have, they have to be a teacher, so they have to have a teacher, and then they have to have media certification. Now, there was a time when a media specialist, to be a media specialist, there's a master's course that you take, or to get that master's certification in that. We have very few people who are going to school to do that. And we also have, many of our universities have stopped even offering that as a course. But there's a test they can take, a state test, to be certified to be a certified media specialist. So we offer that. If a teacher that has a teaching certification wants to be a media specialist, they can take the course, and it's like a 3 credit course, and then take the test and then be certified. But they have to be a teacher to do that. So they have to have the teaching credentials to be able to be a media specialist. But there's training the state has offered. They just started it in January. So we've gone through that training, and we've now provided training to all of our media specialists. I will tell you one thing that we never did. We never shut down our media specialist libraries at the schools. We never told our teachers, take all the books home. That has never happened in Citrus County schools. I'm going to tell you that. What we've had done now is, now that the state said, here's the training, here's the credentials and requirements, we've said, okay, we need to look at what they're requesting, because we want to follow what the state's telling us. And let's see how we can then match that up to meet the needs of our kids in our community. And so we've looked at what's appropriate, what books are appropriate in each of the grade levels. So we look at grade level bands. Your elementary, which are kids age maybe 3 or 4 years old, all the way up to about 9 or 10 would be our elementary. So pre-K to 5. And then our 6th through 9th was our they're kind of getting to that tween age, if you've taught middle school or are familiar with middle school kids. And then our high school. We know there are probably books that you may have at home that you would say, I wouldn't want an elementary school kid reading, but it's appropriate for you to read. It's appropriate for a middle school kid to read, but maybe not elementary. So we have to make sure that the books are placed in the right place. There may be books that you all read that you say they're okay for you all to read, but should we have high school kids reading them? Probably not. When they graduate, they're 18, they graduate high school, those would be books they could read. We want to make sure that the books are there and the right place. We also know parents are a very important part of this process. So we want parents to have a say in what their child is reading. They need to determine what's best for them. That is not our job to determine what they want to read. So we want to make sure that we're providing the right content. So we go through this process. We have parents, community members involved on these teams to review the books that are in our media specialists or media centers. A media specialist is at the lead of that. It also then comes to the district. The district has a chance to review those, and then we make them available. But the biggest piece I want you to know is we've never not had books in our library and closed our libraries down. Like you may have heard on the news and other places in the state of Florida, Citrus has not done that. Why the other districts did, I don't know. We'd have to ask their districts. We have not done that. It's been very important to our superintendent and our school board to make sure that the books are available to kids.
Thank you.
So I know we hear that a lot. So there's a misconception out there. So that's very, very important.
Scott, I want to add one thing.
Yes.
Before this law went to effect, we had a very similar challenge process from day one. So parents, community members, anybody still had access to challenge a book that we've had in place for many, many years. So we've given our community the opportunity to do that.
What we did is rewrote the policy. The school board writes policy and approves policy. So we wrote that policy to align more with what the state is requiring. But we've always had that opportunity for the community to review. We have people all the time calling saying, can I come look at your textbooks that we have? Because we have all of our textbooks available. Now, you can't take the textbook home and, say, I want to take the algebra book home and look at it because, we have to have the books there for people to read. But if you want to come look at it, you set up an appointment, our director of elementary or secondary will meet with you. They'll give you the books and you can spend as much time as you want reading, looking at the content and seeing what's gone through. Even as we go through the process of buying and purchasing new textbook for kids, we do the same thing. We make those books available. Again, we couldn't send them home to everybody in the community, but we have it available here at the district. If you want to go online, you have a phone or a tablet, we can give you an access code. You can go look at it and review the content online as well so that you can give input. And if there's something you have a concern about, there's a process, there's a form to say, I saw this, I have a question about it. Many times we've had people hear things, we look at it, they look at it and they say, you know what, that's not really a major concern. I understand, because you see, if you pull one thing out of context, you kind of miss the whole thing. Because you know, when you read a book, you could take a sentence out and it could be misconstrued. But when you look at it in the context of what's being read, it makes a whole different meaning. So a lot of times those conversations occur and we can explain that to you if you want to. But certainly there is the challenge process that we have available. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just wondering, since the new state guidelines went into effect and you guys were all trained on it, have there been any books removed or upgraded to higher grade or age levels based on the state?
There have been some books that as they've looked at those guidelines, they've had to shift to different levels just because they didn't meet the criteria of what the state. I don't have that number with me. I mean, I certainly can get that for you from Ms. Androsky, but I know there's been some that they've gone through.
So despite all your care, there's been some impact.
Some, but I would honestly say minimal, but I will tell you, if you ask our media specialists, when they first came out, they were very, very nervous about it. But as they've gone through the process as a team, they feel very supported and they feel like, you know what, we're doing the right thing because we want to make sure the right books are with kids. And you probably know media specialists every year, and we've done this every year. When I was a principal at 2 schools, I would work with my media specialists. They would do what they cultivate through all of the books. So they'd go through and curate the books to say, are there books here that maybe haven't been checked out in 15, 20 years? Why are they still, if they're not in circulation, what's the reason? You know, is it outdated? Is it outdated content? Is there a newer book that needs to replace that? So they've always done that. We've kind of reviewed the books to say, do these books really, need to be here? Are they, and again, not that it's anything, it just could be outdated content because some new information has been lifted out. How many of you have rotary dial phones? Right? Y'all know what I'm talking about? You ask a kid what a rotary dial phone is, they look at you and say, what are you talking? I've never heard of such a thing. They don't know. Y'all have the phones that used to be on the wall. And if you were talking to your friends, your mom and dad and grandma and grandpa, everybody heard what you said. Everybody has a cell phone now. Kids don't understand that. So if that technology is there, and I've seen some books, it's like, this is brand new technology about phones and having a private line. Remember party lines? Who remembers party lines? Y'all remember that too? See, I feel like I'm getting old. Shouldn't say that, but I do. I mean, those are things kids today don't understand that concept. And so that might be a book that was in there like, this is great new technology, and yet it's really outdated. So other than making historical, it's written in a sense of here's new stuff, right? So those are the kind of things that we want to do. We want to make sure we're staying current, keeping kids up to date with the new information that's out there. Some of the new words and look at the dictionary. Think of all the words out in the dictionary now that maybe years ago, if you said, what's a gigabyte? When I was in school, if you said that, I would think it's an animal or something or some kind of insect. But now we know what that is. Hashtag. Who knows what a hashtag is, right? You know what a hashtag is? What do you remember it being? The number sign, right?
Yes.
That used to be the number sign. But I say that to somebody, they're like, no, it's a hashtag. I said, no, it's not. Because that's why. But now it's transitioned, right? Those things happen. We have to stay current with the new information that's out there. Yes, ma'am.
Can a challenge come from someone who is not living in the community?
Yes,
I believe, yes, it can.
it can come from anyone.
Anyone can come do the challenge, but there's a form and you have to really be specific about, this is what I see, not just, I don't like that book. Okay, what don't you like about the book? What did you find in the book that was offensive or reason that shouldn't be where it is? Yes.
Well, I was listening to you. I've been a teacher since 1966. I taught most of the time in Gainesville, but I taught in Floral City too. And what I'm upset about is people who are challenging books. They don't want their children reading them.
Right.
So now all children read those.
And that's why we have a committee, because just because they come in and challenge that book doesn't mean we're going to get rid of it. And that's why we've got community members, teachers, support staff, or we've got all kinds of people on those committees. So just because somebody challenges a book doesn't mean we're going to yank it out.
What happens if the state challenges it? You have to remove it.
If the state challenges it, what the state would probably do to us is probably not challenge it. They probably just say this book's got to be removed.
Yes. They may do that. That hasn't happened that I'm aware of yet, but you're correct. The state could say, Citrus County, you can no longer have this book and this book, but they've not done that yet. They've still, in my opinion, have left it as local control for each district and community.
So we don't have banned books. Okay.
Because we keep hearing about that all the time.
That's what they're calling what it is banning books. And what we've really gone into this with is we're trying to find the books that are the appropriate grade level. As I've told you, you know, like I'm going to use an example, and I know nobody in here's read this book. I've not read it. 50 Shades of Grey. You've probably heard of the book, right? 50 Shades of Grey. Would you want a high school kid reading that book?
No.
And if you don't want a high school, you obviously don't want an elementary or middle. So it's those kind of things to make sure that we're making sure the right type of book is in the hands of kids. So those would be, not probably it's a little extreme, but that's just the one that came to my
And
mind.
there really has to be a purpose for that book to be in the library. So using that example was an extreme example. But I get it.
But it's, you know,
But it's true. So when we say ban books, if there could be ban books down the road as we go through the whole process. But it's not going to be banned because one person didn't like it, because we've looked at the content and also the purpose of it being there. Yeah, by the committee.
Yes, and I'm concerned that I hear, and of course it's hearsay, about history and civil rights and so on, and those books are being shelved or put away somewhere, and I don't want to hear that. If we learn from history.
right.
That's
right.
not been done.
And that's not been done.
Glad to
That's
hear it.
not been done.
Yes, please.
I don't have children, but obviously it's a concern when you put it into a cultural context. But if a book is removed from the school system for whatever reason, using your example, if a parent felt that that was important for their child to read, there's nothing that prohibits them from checking in their local library, because just because you pull it from the school,
Correct.
the libraries could potentially still have it, because I'm assuming there's a fair amount of overlap in your libraries.
And that's a good point, because the thing that we keep in the back of our head, every book they can find on the internet. And these kids are searching the internet all the time, and so are the parents. So if there's a book out there like the one he gave and they said, I want my child to read that, they can go to the local library, they can certainly find it on the internet. So just because we ban it out of our school because it's not age appropriate, it's not the right content, has nothing to do with curriculum, it's not what we believe is there, they would still have access to it somewhere. Good point.
I have 4 children and 8 grandchildren. I've always had confidence in the school system. I've always trusted the teachers that taught my children and grandchildren. The new legislation gave the appearance that there was a serious problem in the state and that they had to fix the problem. Did a problem like that really exist?
I'll be glad to address that.
Good.
I think sometimes our laws are put into place because one thing happened to one person. It could be, and I'll be very careful about what I say here, but I do believe that a student, something's happened to a student, one person gets a hold of it and they run with it, and the next thing we know, it becomes law. I think there may have been school districts in the state of Florida where some of these books have been, or where some of the books that they may be talking about removing. But I will tell you, as of today, we have not found those books in our libraries, and if we have, we would certainly take them out. If we did not, if it went through our process. So I would have to stand and tell you Citrus County, I believe, has a great process in place to make sure that doesn't happen. Any other questions on that? We can go back to that too, if something pops in your head, because if you're like me, you may have one.
Or if you ever want to meet, I don't mind. I could set up a meeting with you. I could get Ms. Androsky involved. So if you ever want to meet individually, or if a couple of you want to get together, we certainly don't mind. Ms. Androsky, myself, Ms. Kaler, she's our director of elementary. We can certainly meet and have conversation if you have further questions.
Just one, I hear that in other districts, parents challenge a book without even having read it. Because there are forms, you checked it, I read it or not. And I don't call the process in Citrus. Must they read the book?
They need to lift out where the issue is. So whether they've read it or not, you know, I mean, you could check whatever you want. I mean, we can put that on there, but they have to give a reason and a rationale. So our hope is we're very, I would say, transparent. We want to be open and communicative with the public and the parents. So if someone wants to sit and meet with us to have a conversation, we are happy to do that at any time and say, let's talk through, here's what it is, here's how it's used. And if it's something that we need to then address, then we go through that process and address it. Sometimes, you know, people come and say, you know what, I didn't look at it from that lens. It makes sense. And we move on. So.
Yes, ma'am.
Just a comment, under your excellent leadership, we're in Citrus County, we're doing fine, but we need to be aware that there are, I don't know how many other counties in Florida where we still need to be vigilant. And speak up.
Yes.
We agree. Yes, sir.
I'm much more concerned about sins of omission than I am commission. When I was in high school, there was, in fact, I didn't see it I've never seen it in a history textbook. A discussion of the Tulsa riots of 1931 or whenever it was, the worst that the country has ever seen. There's so much that's missing that's not overtly offensive. The kinds of complaints that I think I'm normally aware of I find that offensive. That's not a funny joke. That's a rotten way to portray women or something like that that you can put your finger on. I'm really worried about things being left out that give children an incomplete sense of what history is.
Well, what I'm concerned about is a child goes to a teacher that they trust and says to them, I'm an older child, not a third grader, but an older child, but I'm not older elementary child, and says, I feel like I'm gay. What do you do? What does a teacher do there?
Allowed to do.
Here's what happens, okay? And I tell every group when they bring that up, that I think that bill, don't say gay, was kind of, I think a lot of people put a lot of words into that bill on what the teachers do. But I know that our teachers, if you were to come up to a teacher and say, I think I'm gay, we've got guidance counselors in every school. We've got social workers throughout the entire school system. We've got psychologists, we've got psychiatrists, we've got everybody that we need to get involved with that. And I promise you that our teachers don't ignore that. Now, more so what the bill says is that teacher can't get up and start teaching about sexual genders and those types of things. And I know they just made it K-12, but we have to abide by the law. But what has happened, though, is put the fear of the good Lord into the teachers by, what can they say, what can they do? But I'll defend any teacher taking that child under their wing and working with them, working with the parents and getting them the help that they need or the people they need to talk to, whether it's help or just to be able to talk to.
Good.
Okay.
I'm so glad.
So.
And if I can go back to your question, sir. So we teach what's called the Florida standards. And so all our state, we used to do years ago, there was something called Common Core. Y'all heard of Common Core, right? That went away. We moved away. We're now using something called the Florida standards. And so that is what our teachers have to teach, is what those standards are. And we have standards for English language arts, math, science, social studies, all of the curriculums. We have that available. Textbooks that are aligned to those standards are what the books that our teachers use. I certainly have no problem if you want to set up a time, we can get our social studies expert, Mr. Ball, to meet with you and go over some of those questions to say, okay, I'd like to know what's in there. We're going through an adoption next year. So we're going to be adopting a new textbook. The one we have is about 6 years old, but it is all aligned to what the standards and what that is. He is a wealth of knowledge regarding social studies and the curriculum and the history. So I know he'd be able to give you, I wouldn't be able to give you the full information that he can, but he has a great wealth of information to help make sure you know that. But that is what we have to instruct, is what the state provides for us and tells us those standards are. And again, that's Florida specific standards, we do not teach Common Core. I'm just going to say that out there. So I'm not happy.
So the state still controls
Absolutely.
what you can and cannot teach.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Now, not how you teach it,
Right.
not how, well,
What you.
right. So they say, here's the content, but how you deliver that instruction is certainly teachers, as a former teacher, that's your discretion, how you want to deliver that.
There are certain things you've been telling professors what they can teach.
Yeah.
Look at my son's college, he went to new college. I can't believe what happened.
Yeah. But yes, they do control what
They
we
do,
teach.
because they say, you can go online, it's just look up floridastandards.org, and that'll tell you what we have to teach. Now, how teachers teach it, that's certainly up to them. we want to provide teachers with curriculum. So we align when we go through that whole process. And it's usually the curriculum lasts about 5-6 years before we adopt a new set of curriculum. But that's all available to teachers. It has everything they need to provide the instruction, the assessments, activities, everything in there to teach the standards.
Yes, ma'am.
Just, and I'm going back 1,000 years when I was in school, but
I was right there with you.
I said it a little bit before your time, but not much. My recollection is, because when I went through school, I'm sure we had something similar to standards, whether they were, I don't know what they called them. I just showed up.
Right.
And did what they told me to do and learned what they told me to learn. But my recollection is that there was, within any of my classes that I took, we did special projects. In other words, somebody might, I can think of in 7th grade when we had world history and we're studying Rome. So people might be off looking at various things that were probably not on anybody else's radar screen, but because it was my assignment, I got to pick my topic and I learned about that topic. Does that freedom still exist?
To some extent, what the standards has narrowed in on is that how much time, and they don't set the time, but how much time is given to certain topics. It could be the Civil War. You may have a Civil War guru out there, a teacher, and almost the whole 9 weeks was spent on the Civil War. And I'm just using that for an example. So what it's done, I may be a butterfly fanatic. So I spend a lot of time, all my science curriculum is about butterflies. So what the standards has done is expanded what our teachers are teaching for each standard and what they felt like was important. But again, it's all set by the state, but there should be plenty of areas out there where teachers can still teach their favorite topics, but it may limit how much time they spend on them.
And give students opportunities to do what you said. I know many teachers give students opportunities to do exploration of various topics and pieces, again, that fall within whatever those standards are for that particular grade level, because we want to make sure we're hitting what we're expected to teach at each grade level. So, and we've always had, might have been back when you were saying when you were in school, which is probably the same time I was in school, minimum skills. So we used to do what we call, this is the minimum that kids need to know to be able to pass. Now we've kind of moved away from what we called minimum skills. And it's much more in depth than what it was. I remember when I first started teaching, but they were basic minimum skills students needed. Yes, ma'am.
There was an African-American church in the Chronicle a while back, and the members were upset that their children were not going to be taught what they wanted them to learn about the civil rights movement, about slavery. And I'm going to contact that church. I have 1 million DVDs. I taught mostly African-American children in Gainesville, some severely emotionally disturbed middle school students. And we always had units on slavery, the Holocaust, civil rights movement. I'm going to go to that church, and if they would like me to show those DVDs they can't hire me.
No.
So we can do it outside of the school system. They can still.
But they can also contact us if we can have them in touch with some of those content area specialists in the schools to let them know what we do teach. We teach a whole section on the Holocaust. I know civil rights. I know all those things are taught. So they could do that just so they would know.
Coming down the road, you may not be able to teach that.
I don't have that answer,
Yeah.
but you could be right. I don't have that answer. And if you get more book questions or our process, we'll stay around for questions. Scott, put your hand down.
Okay.
I thought you were raising your hand.
I'm here.
I thought he was asking a question. Let's see. I'll do a couple of these short ones because, and then I'm going to ask Chief Vincent to come up and talk to you a little bit about our safety. How do you feel about the proposed legislation that wants school board elections to be partisan? I think we're nonpartisan. I mean, we represent the entire county. I think when you go to the polls to vote, I think you look at what they stand for. I think you look at their beliefs, what they say, and I think you can control that as a voter. But I'm sure it's going to happen. Any questions on that? That's just my opinion, because it doesn't matter what party I am. I don't change who Sam Himmel is. I've got my morals, my beliefs, the way I've been raised, and I run our school district based on law, but also some of my beliefs when we have to go in there and make final decisions, what's best for Citrus County. And I'm very aware of the beliefs and what Citrus County believes in. So we could probably debate that subject all day, any day, on if it's partisan or not, but I just think looking at the individuals is what's more important. Yes, ma'am.
I'm a little concerned that the law just passed that a candidate does not have to live in a school district to run for office. So we can have people sending ringers from anywhere and get voted in. That's very disturbing. I just wonder what you thought.
Well, the law's always been that school board members didn't have to live in the district as they run, but they have to live there once they're elected. And because I think that's the way the commissioners were, or I've got that backwards. I think the board members didn't have to do that. But my understanding was they still have to live in that district once they get elected.
Exactly.
Right.
But while they're running.
And we know how that works. We've seen that in action.
Yes, we do.
But I agree. I do think we need, and some school districts vote by district. Like if you're a District 1 board member, only that district would vote for you. They have, named districts like that, but ours doesn't do that. But I do think we need a good representation from around the entire county, because we've got different areas. We've got South Homosassa in that area, and we've got, Citrus Springs, and some of them may have different needs, and we like to have all those perspectives on the board. So, yes.
What would the impact of term limits be? I mean, other than you can't stay on forever, but from a practical standpoint, what do you?
Practical standpoint, I think we're where we are today in Citrus County because of consistency, because of knowledge, because of things that people brought to the table. And again, voters have the right to vote people out if they don't like what they're doing. But I also think that when you see a lot of turnover, and I'm looking at districts now where the governors replace some of the board members and then they turn around and replace their superintendent, or they've gone through 3 or 4 superintendents in a couple of years. I think that's a detriment to that district. And I just believe that consistency is more important than putting term limits out there.
Yes.
And I know that's not the belief of everybody, but if you've got dead wood on the board, then get rid of them. But in the meantime, if you've got good wood on the board, why do you want to get rid of them?
All right.
So,
Use the good wood to build.
all right. So let's see. What was one more? How our county adjusts to the new LGBTQ legislation. As you all know, it was K-3, now it's K-12. We will abide by the law, but I believe that we'll still take our stance that if there's issues or concerns with the student, we'll make sure that student gets either help, counseling, or somewhere that they can go talk to and hopefully work with their parents as they go through this.
It occurred to me that the student may have a concern that the parent is opposed to. So how are you going to, you may not know the answer to this question. How are you going to deal with that situation?
So they don't tell the parent? Is that what you're saying?
They
They're
do
afraid
tell the
to?
parent, I'm concerned. The parent says, "Oh," and then the student says, well, I'm going to tell the school. And then the parent says, oh, no, you're not. And then it becomes a battle between the school and the student and the teachers and the administration.
And I can't answer that, but I do know that we've had conversations about that. We've had to have it with legal about what do we do if it's a change in the way the student is behaving or anything like that, because I do know that was a concern that we had, that if kids are afraid to tell their parents.
Okay, can I ask one other question? I may be on your agenda. I don't know. I'm probably asking you. I'm concerned about the school voucher system and your perception of it.
Okay.
But you can address in another.
Now I'll address it. I'll address it. I will address that. Do you want to ask?
First, Himmel, I was going to ask about the charter.
Okay. Well, we've had the Family Empowerment Act for a few years, where some of the lower income or students with disabilities could choose what school they wanted to go to. Now, as you know, the law's been changed where any student can go anywhere they want to. We are, I won't say scared to death, but we're very worried about it because the state has projected about 950 of our students to choose that option, which is probably a couple hundred more than we've had in the past. This past year, that bill cost me $5.9 million. And I think next year it will probably be close to $7 to $8 million that will cost me. Now, what they tell us and what you're going to hear, and you ladies and gentlemen are very involved with legislation, so you know what's getting ready to come out, is how good the legislators have been and the state has been to public education. So you're going to see an increase in our budget in the BSA, which is a base student allocation. That's how we get funded. It's based on the number of students. So what they've done is they've increased that dollar amount. But if you go down and look at my fund balance, there's a negative number coming out that we've got to reserve close to probably $7 million this year, that if they all use it, we will lose those dollars. So even though it's up at the top, but at the bottom, it'll have to come out. Our concern is if Judy takes her child out at the beginning of the school year and says, I'm going to homeschool or take them to a private school, so those dollars leave me. Okay, well, if I had to homeschool my kids in about 2 weeks, I'd have them back in public education. So in a few months or a few weeks, they come back to us. Well, everything I do between now and the opening of school is to balance classrooms, to balance what's going on in the schools with the number of students we have. So us not knowing if all 900's leaving us or if 800's coming back, are we getting the funding back? We don't know those answers yet. It's supposedly they've got a process in place, but I haven't seen it, or I don't know it very well, maybe, to find out how those dollars are coming back to us. But that's a big concern of ours.
I heard yesterday, Saturday at my Democratic Women's Committee meeting I went to, that you're not gonna get that money back. But I don't know. I'm
Yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering, how do we know that if they get the money to go to school, that they're going to use it on the school and that they don't just use it on something else?
We've asked for accountability.
Yeah.
Because for that reason, it's supposed to go into a empowerment savings account or something. And then we don't, if I was somebody right now, I'd open up a private school because that's who's going to get the money right now. So I'm not sure if the whole process has been well thought out. I get the intent, I tell my staff, we need to make sure we do the best job. People won't want to leave us. If they've left us for a reason, we need to find out why. Maybe they don't leave just because they hate Sam Himmel. I hope that's not the reason they leave. But, we offer a lot of things to our kids. We have all types of academies. We've got, we've got the Health Academy, the IB program, the Art Academy, the new Construction Academy. We've got computer science, and we offer all these extracurricular activities, which to me is what's important to keep our kids in school. So, it's around $8,000 that people will receive. And that's our fear. Do they send that check? And we're just waiting on the full process. I don't know if we get the money back. We hope there's an accountability system for that.
Just one more question. How's that Environmental Academy doing?
It's doing awesome.
I wasn't able to go there on Earth Day and
It's doing good.
it's, oh, good.
If nothing else, when everything came down the pike about the renovation, it made a very large public awareness about what goes on at the Environmental Academy.
Good.
So it's been a good thing, and their board's active, and they're all getting out and they're making sure people know about it, and they're raising funds to make sure that happens. Now, I know we took the heat that we didn't give them the money, but we're not set up to give them the money because they're a charter school. So the money comes through to us and then we give them that money. Now, we pay for a lot of their transport. We pay for a lot of things that other charter schools don't get because that's what we do here, because they're still our kids. But we pay for transportation. We pay for a lot of things that they need help on. But as for the construction piece, we have our own schools to fix. Yes, ma'am.
I have to change the subject a little.
That's okay.
I'm concerned about the retention of teachers and the number of substitutes that are in classrooms, that those people, even though they may have a teaching degree, don't know that subject matter. And how is that impacting our students?
We probably have more teachers on staff now, teachers who did not go through the College of Education, but we also got colleges across the state canceling the College of Education. You go to South Florida, some of these schools, and you say, okay, all the kids going to medical school. That big group gets up, and all kids going to this school, they get up, and how many kids are going to education? 1 or 2 stand up. So what we've done is, and I met with staff just yesterday and told our principals that At the beginning of school, we've got that class size amendment that we're supposed to follow that's never been proven that it helps student performance, but it's the law. So a few years ago, they went back to school average, which gave us a little flexibility, but I've made the decision with staff that it's more important for us to open school with every student being in a certified teacher's classroom. And every teacher may have 2 or 3 extra kids based on the class size amendment than it is to open up with substitutes. We've got some wonderful substitutes. I don't want to downplay that. There'll always be a time for a substitute come in, but I think our parents and our community will go to bed and sleep better knowing that our kids are in a certified teacher's classroom. Retention has always been an issue and a concern, and just throwing money at teachers does not keep them there because there's a lot of things they deal with every single day. And if we don't start getting more funding for mental health,
Yes.
mental health is where it's at. And we've got kids with issues. We've got kids that come, and I tell our staff, you're probably the most positive role model that some of our kids ever see. And we don't know what goes on behind closed doors. We don't know if kids have electricity. We don't know what goes on many, many times. Now, most of our teachers will end up finding out and figuring out for these kids. But mental health is really where it's at right now with some of the issues that we're dealing with our kids. And we're starting to see those issues younger and younger. I mean, we're talking, Chief Vincent, I'm gonna have him come up. We're starting to see that even in our kindergarten, first grade, some of these violent issues. Yes, ma'am.
Who keeps tabs on what these, not public schools, but the vouchers? Who keeps tabs on what that school is doing, teaching the children that decide to go there rather than the public school? Is there a?
I don't have a real solid answer, but it should be the state. Because the Department of Education, they've got a charter school division and they've got a division for all those, so they should be doing it.
Okay, but you don't know that.
But I can't guarantee.
So that sounds like it's a question.
Yes, it is. Good question.
I know that it's legal for veterans to become teachers and be in classrooms, and I have nothing against veterans, but their skill set is not the same skill set as becoming a teacher. That concerns me. And I know there's, at least I know of one.
I don't think we've had a huge number. We've had a few, but we haven't had a huge number to do that. What she's had her hand up.
Here's a chance to ask a question that I've been wondering about a long time. Now, my sister's a teacher, my good friends are teachers, but what exactly does credentialing do to a person that, that you think it's so important that they get those credentials as a teacher in order to teach in the classroom? Can you just tell me what are the quintessential?
That I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
What does credentialing do for a credential? What is the credential that's critical?
Well, there's several. First, I'll talk about content. If I've got an algebra teacher, I hope that teacher knows algebra. If I've got a science teacher, I hope that teacher knows science. And that's what they focus on when they go to college. In our elementary world, they focus on every content area. So that's important. But I'll tell you, a biggie is the classroom management. And that's what they do in school, in college. They've got classroom management courses and those types of things. And we still do that in our professional development because, it's one thing to go to college all those years. And I'll give you a fine example. I was about the second day on my PE job, and this little girl came up to me and said, little Johnny's peeing on second base. Well, they didn't tell me in college what to do when a little kid pees on second base. So, but there's a lot of things that go on in the classroom that really is not taught. Sometimes it may be just your knowledge or what you do personally, and just probably loving kids and figuring those things out.
Classroom management. Now, content, I don't know. I know a lot of classroom teachers who say, I'm not good with math. Many people will say that, but they have to teach it anyway. So content aside, because you can get that without being a good teacher, right? Without being credentialed, you can have content. But what is not practical? I'm just curious. I don't need to be critical. I'm just curious.
You're not being critical.
I agree that it's totally critical. Classroom management. I agree. What else?
Well, they have a lot of courses when they go through school, and that's one thing we're learning right now, is the teachers that or a lot of people we're hiring who come from the private industry, all right? They're not used to having 20 little first and second graders in front of them all day and knowing how to manage them, okay? So a lot of it's just how to manage kids, and that classroom management's huge.
Okay, so it's mostly like childhood stuff and teenage stuff and.
And I don't say mostly, I think there's a balance. I either think you're made to teach or you're not. My husband, I would die if he came to want to teach tomorrow to one of the schools, because he would not be a good teacher, because I know that. And I tell him that, nor will I let him drive a school bus, but, and we need drivers bad. But, you know, it's just a balance. It's about, I think you have to have a passion for teaching. You got to have a passion to be with kids all day, because kids are kids. We all know that. You may not have had 18 in your life at your home, but if you've had 3 or 4 at one time, you know, there's different personalities. There's all types of things. So I just think a lot of it is about having the passion to be in that classroom and working with those teachers.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
One thing I'd like to say, when you're in college training to be a teacher, you don't just get content taught. You have method courses which teach you how to teach the content to children, depending upon what grade level you're going to teach. After I became a teacher, I loved working with children with behavior problems. And I went to a wonderful alternative school in Gainesville, where it's with loving and positive. And I became a special ed teacher. I had to get special ed certification. So it's not just any person can go in a classroom and be a teacher, like you say. You have a passion for it, which I've always had.
And she is correct about the methods courses, because you may not be good at math, but they will teach you how to teach that math where at least you can stay ahead of the kids. And sometimes that's hard.
The other thing I wanted to say that I raised my hand about is people are upset that there are substitutes in the classroom. The reason there are substitutes are because teachers are leaving Florida. They don't want to be told what they can teach, what books they can have in the classroom. And I'm not saying you
I don't take offense.
I mean, people who aren't teachers are living in Florida because they don't like what's going on. And more teachers are leaving for other states.
I'm going to take this question. If Chief Vincent will come up here, I want to touch a little bit on safety, if we've got a couple more minutes.
I kind of have 2 questions. One is mental health. Is getting more counselors part of that plan, so they don't have to just work on the college applications? Or are there special therapists?
We have sessions in some of the schools, but we also have a partnership with Livestream, and they bring in their counselors. And I'll be honest, it's finding them. They have as hard a time to find them and hire them as we do.
The other question, maybe both can help. I'm interested in what we call returning citizens, youngsters having completed their prison time for not relatively minor situations, and who can't find work. Is there any way the Construction Academy could include them despite this blemish on their career? If they don't have a high school degree, could they enroll? Could there be an experiment with 1 or 2 people?
You mean to attend the academy? Well, WTC's got several academies that they are allowed to go in. And the high school is probably a little more restricted because we have laws that, it doesn't say you can't work as a convicted felon. What it says is there's certain disclaimers that we have to go by that would not allow them to teach in the schools or work in the schools. But the WTI, as long as they pass, or WTC, as long as they pass the criteria, they could go there and get a certification of something. Okay. Anyways, a few years ago, I hired Chief Vincent as our chief of police, and I took a beating for that too. But it was very important to me to take our safety up to the next level because it's a very large concern of ours. And as you all know, I'm one of these on the questions about gun violence. So I'd like for Chief Vincent just to speak with you for a few minutes and let you know what's going on in Citrus County schools. And I think you'll leave here today feeling really good about our safety.
All right, good morning.
Good morning.
So they said I have until 2 with you, but I'll promise to get you out of here about 1:30. All right. So what I wanted to talk about is just kind of give you the 10,000-foot level view of what safety and security looks like in our school. It's much different than when I was in school. It's probably much different than when you were in school. We have sworn law enforcement officers in every school in the state of Florida now. That was as a result of the 2018 shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in South Florida when that legislation passed. So really in the last 5 years, we've seen a tremendous change in school safety. So this is I'm like 2 weeks shy from completing my 30th year here at Citrus County. So I was an SRO many moons ago when I first met Miss Himmel back there. So our relationship with the school district and law enforcement has always been very strong. Even going back to the early days with Sheriff Dawsey, his desire and working towards getting a sworn law enforcement in every school was long before Marjorie Stoneman Douglas happened, and it was really an issue of budgets and all of those things that happen. It's what we can afford to do and what we want to do sometimes are two different things. So what it looks like today, as you see, my position with the school district is obviously chief of the police, but every school district in the state of Florida has a position called school safety specialist. So all 67 counties have a person like me in their district. Some are not sworn law enforcement, some are law enforcement. There's a mixed bag depending on the district that you're in. So when you look at safety in our county, we have 22 schools. It's about 15,600 students on any given day on our campuses. We have 23 school resource officers. We contract those officers with the sheriff's office. That's 20 deputies and 3 supervisors. That costs us about $2.8 million a year for those 23 individuals. We also have our school guardian program, which is run through the school district, and I'm in charge of the school guardians. Those are armed men and women who are additional people at our secondary schools. So all of our middle schools and high schools have an additional armed person. So every one of those has 2 armed individuals there in those schools. The 2 schools that are not covered by a sworn law enforcement officer are the Withlacoochee Technical College, that has a school guardian assigned there, and the Academy of Environmental Science also has a school guardian assigned to there. So overall, we have about 34, not including myself and the guys that work for me at the police academy, but about 34 uniformed people in our schools every day there to protect students and staff if, gosh forbid, anything violence were to happen. So when we talk about, the topics that I sat here and listened to, about the things, a lot of this comes back to a lot of mental health. I can tell you, like Ms. Himmel just touched on, we're starting to see the earlier onset of things. I can tell you the difference when I was a resource officer 20 some years ago, and the difference between today is when I first became an SRO, we really didn't see a whole lot of issues at elementary schools. When I first started, I was a middle school SRO, and I had 3 elementary schools that were assigned to me that I was there. They very rarely called me for any kind of police action. Most of my interaction at elementary level was teaching the curriculums that we developed. But as I see it today, we're doing behavioral threat assessments on first graders, second graders who are threatening violence against their peers, staff members, things like that. So is some of it the lack of discipline? Yes. Yeah, some of it is the lack of discipline, lack of that good home environment that, I'm a firm believer that especially little kids are a product of their environment. They're seeing those kind of behaviors at home. The language that you'll see, some of you would be shocked at what a kindergartner might say to you, as far as their language, but it happens these days. So a lot of that is learned behavior, but a lot of it too is I really think we're starting to see the earlier onset of mental illness at a younger level. I really think that's becoming an issue. To give you an idea, we have when we talk about support for our students and staff, we have behavioral threat assessment teams at every school. There are personnel designated at every school that's on a threat assessment team. So if any threat comes to a student or from a student to another student, there's a team of individuals that come together that assess that threat. This year, now you got to remember when we talk about years, school years are different than most. Most people think of years as 365 days. Our school years are 180 days. I just pulled the numbers a few days ago, 150 days into school. We've done 411 threat assessments. That's threats to others. We've done 402 suicide risk assessments. That's when they're threatening to hurt themselves. So there is a lot of mental health issues that we're seeing out there that are really tied into the things that we deal with as far as the safety and security. Yes, ma'am.
Does Citrus County have an anti-bullying curriculum?
We do have a lot of those curriculums that are developed in different levels of our students. I can tell you, in addition to what the school does, the curriculums that we developed a long time ago at the sheriff's office also include those. So we teach first, third, fifth, seventh, ninth graders curriculums from a law enforcement's perspective. And a lot of those things are about drug abuse prevention, bullying, self-esteem, all of those kinds of topics about good citizenship that we try to give to those students as well.
Because nowadays, in addition to the pandemic causing mental health problems, kids are on the social media getting bullying.
Sure.
And,
Yeah, if I was a higher power and get rid of social media, I'd do it like that, right? Most of, as you guys monitor Facebook, social medias, all of those things, you see what we are dealing with a lot of the times. Social media is our nemesis. It just is something that we cannot control, but we do our best to try to get ahead of. When we hear threats and we see those things, I can tell you that my day doesn't end when all the students go home. And Ms. Himmel can tell you that there's a lot of nights that we're chasing down threats from students, working with our law enforcement partners at the sheriff's office to go out to those homes to make sure that there is no threat towards any of our students or staff that following day. Our days don't end at 3 o'clock or 3:30 when everybody else goes home on some days.
last week in Gainesville, I couldn't believe it. A boy came to school with a backpack because his teacher had asked his parents to please send a backpack, but she had to send him home. She had a loaded gun in her car, and someone borrowed the car and was uncomfortable with the gun being in the car.
Right.
So she put it in the trunk in a backpack.
Mhm.
The parent sent
Yeah.
that backpack to school, and the first grader brought it to school in the backpack, and the teacher went to put something in the backpack and found it. And they're not charging the parents. Are you kidding me?
Right.
It was an accident.
Yeah, we could go on a lot about gun control, gun violence. Everybody has opinions on those things, but it comes down to good common sense, and a lot of people, I will hate to say that, don't have that. That shouldn't even be in our vocabulary, common sense anymore. But accountability for some of those things, it's unfortunate. There's new laws coming down with how we can carry weapons in the state of Florida and access to weapons and all of those kind of things. But it all comes back to good education. You should still educate the people that want to own handguns, how to properly store them and how to properly secure them. That's two of the biggest and most important elements that I think that we should be addressing. And holding people accountable, right? How you store your weapons, not to get into personal beliefs or anything, but everybody has a right to do what they're legally allowed to do.
Especially if there are children involved.
Right. But you should take those preventative measures to make sure that you're doing everything that you can to be safe with that stuff. All right, so we looked real quick at our physical security. I told you about our Guardian program and our school resource officers, about 34 of those men and women out there every day, keeping our students and staff safe. The next thing I'll talk real quickly on is our technology. As you know, technology has really changed everything. I'm happy to tell you that in 2021, I'm trying to get my years straight. Another thing from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas was the need for a panic alert system in every school. One of the lessons that they learned in Stoneman Douglas is a big campus. That shooting was happening in one building. People in the building next to it didn't know that there was a shooting happening there. So how do we notify all of our students and staff that there's an actual problem happening on our campus? I can tell you that we did a lot of research on the front end of that because it was put in legislation that we had to have a system in place by the 22-23 school year. So we chose a system called Centegix, which is actually this little badge right here. You guys can see it on the back of my ID badge. This puts the power in the hands of every employee in our school district, whether you're a maintenance worker, field services, substitute, any of those positions have the ability to put a school into a lockdown at any time if they see something happening. This badge functions two ways. You can do a localized alert, which says, hey, I just need help from my local team, which is your principals, SROs, and all that could be a medical problem, could be a fight. But then if you, a certain series of pushes on that badge will set off lights, announcements to make sure that everybody on that campus knows that there is a problem. That is reserved for a lockdown, active assailant, they see someone with a gun, all of those worst case scenarios that's reserved for.
So you squeeze it.
Yep, that little gray indentation right there is a button, and I won't give the trade secrets of how to work it. But we train all of our staff on how to work that. Every year, all of our new staff goes through an orientation about how to use their badges that can give those alerts. The great thing about this badge that we learned that was kind of an unintended outcome of this is I never realized how many medical emergencies happen in our school district on a daily basis. We have students that I've learned that pass out every day, just out of nowhere, they're over. So I can think of at least probably 4 on the top of my head at some of our schools that it's almost a daily occurrence. So this is given the ability, if that medical emergency happens at a site, that staff member can do those certain number of presses and they get help right away, because we can't afford to give every staff member a radio, cell phone to call in for help. But this badge actually puts them on a map, on a dot, says, I am David Vincent, I'm in room 203, and I just push my badge and need help. It get us things quickly to those. It works on all of our sports fields. So if we have an injury out on our sports fields, you're not near a radio or anything. It works on all of our campuses across, and it works if I travel from one campus to another, it also works there. So yes, ma'am.
About how often do you have a lockdown and afterwards? Sad day is.
We all cry when you.
Yeah, that's a big sigh. So we've had that happen twice, significantly. So we have. And what I tell to everybody is you can't take humans out of the equation, right? And everybody handles stress differently. So I can tell you that the 2 instances that we've experienced at a high school, the people who intended to initiate a staff alert initiated a lockdown because they were nervous, scared, whatever was happening in front of them. And when I asked them, how many times did you press your badge? They couldn't tell me how many times. Because what was happening was traumatic to them. How I handle stress and you handle stress is probably very different, right? So what we learned the first time this happened, and I will tell you, I was sitting up in Ms. Himmel's conference room with our assistant superintendents, and I think Dr. Hebert was there too. It happened. And I noticed that the school went into lockdown, and all of us are thinking, okay, we learned that it was a false one very quickly. I would say within less than 2 minutes, we in Inverness knew that it was a mistake at Crystal River. And in our minds, thinking this is the first time it's ever happened to us. All right, okay, get everybody back together. Let's recoup, get everybody back into classes, right? What we learned that day, there was no getting back to normal that day. What we learned from that experience and what we put in place since then is that we need to support our students, because it was traumatic to students. It was traumatic to staff because they didn't know that it was a false alarm when it happened. The good that I always tell everybody that came out of that is everything worked 100% that day. That badge put that school in the lockdown. It notified the 911 center in Lecanto. There was firemen, there was police officers heading to that school without anybody picking up the phone to do anything. So all of our systems in place worked very well that day. Our teachers did what they were supposed to do, put our students in lockdown. Students fled the area, which was very stressful, I will tell you, because they fled our campuses, because we've been training them to do that since they were little kids. And that's our policy, which I was going to talk about next.
Fled.
They self-evacuated. They left campus. They left the school grounds, right? So in our emergency plans, we actually have designated sites that if we evacuate students, that students should go to these particular sites, because that's where we look to go pick them up. Every school has designated reunification sites, or what we call rally points outside of the school property, that if you decide to run, we expect to find you at one of those locations.
Dave, I'm going to add something to that. Now, when Chief Vincent says that, that doesn't mean the alarm goes off and the doors fly open and the kids start running. What that means is because there's a lot of communications, and he trains our staff every year for this. So there's a lot of communications coming in from the front office the assailant here, here's the threat, here's the threat. If teachers know that it's safe to let their kids flee, then they have a route that they get those students out and the kids go to the reunification location.
So they don't just go home.
Right.
Right.
Yes,
They're
ma'am.
not supposed
Can you
to.
say a little bit more about, the downside is the vulnerability to false alarms,
Mhm.
whether it's accidental or, some prank calls in that there's a danger and they're really, they're just prank. Well, can you talk about how you deal with these false alarms and minimize their disruption?
Yeah, so false alarms are never good, right? We don't want to put fear in people with false alarms. We do a lot of drills. Sometimes I think we drill students and staff to death sometimes, but again, it's a requirement by the state. The state says we've got to do a fire drill every month. We've got to do a lockdown drill every month that we're practicing with these students. When it comes to false alarms, I don't think you're ever going to totally take those away out of the equation because we're humans. Humans make mistakes. There's certain things that could happen. But I think in the aftermath of those, I hate to call it aftermath because that sounds negative, but in the aftermath of those, it's getting, one, we have staff meetings. I can remember those occasions we had say, hey, what did we learn from this? How do we move forward from this? And how do we relay that information to our students? It's about educating them, saying, hey, this is what happened. You guys handled it this way. What did we learn and how do we move forward past that and try to ease some of those anxieties? I can tell you my son was in the first one that happened and it stressed him out quite a bit, and we had to work through because he did not know if that was an active assailant on the campus that day. And he was one of the students that ran off of that campus because honestly, he was afraid for his life that day. So that's a hard pill to swallow as someone who's in charge of safety and security of our students, but also for every other parent that's worried about their students at our campuses. So working through that, educating people, saying, hey, lessons learned, here's how we debrief from these and move forward. I think that's the best way to handle that. Mistakes are going to happen. And I just don't think that we can stop those from happening, but to minimize
False alarms, feedback into your staff training, your manual training.
Yeah, so false alarms, we do train our staff quite a bit, and where I was kind of segueing into this out of our technology was we're an ALICE certified district. I'm not sure has anyone ever heard of ALICE?
Yes.
All right, so a few people have heard of ALICE. It's really a training philosophy. ALICE is just an acronym: alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate. It gives our staff and students the options of how to respond to an active shooter. Like Ms. Himmel just said, if we know that the active assailant is on the other side of a high school campus, you have the ability to self-evacuate. Statistically, your odds of survival are way better if you're off campus rather than being on campus, right? So ALICE gives you that ability to do that. Now, I will tell you that varies from little guys to big guys. So at our high schools, when we had a lockdown, most of those kids are on the borderlines of being adults. It happened during a class change. They were not in classrooms. They were changing classrooms. They made decisions themselves as future adults that they were leaving and not waiting for someone to give them direction. Now at our elementary level, great thing about those, they're looking to that adult go, what do I do now? Right? And they follow our adults, very organized, it looks very different at elementary than it does at high school because those people are making decisions on their own safety. So ALICE is something that every staff member has to go through the training in our school district. We offer that to all of our substitutes. We like that all of our substitutes also take that training, but that's an annual requirement that we are an ALICE certified district. Every employee goes through that. So we train a lot. We do a lot of drills. Safety, as Ms. Himmel will tell you, Dr. Heber, our philosophy is if you don't feel safe in school, how on earth are you going to learn? And my goal as the chief is to make sure that environment is that environment every day that our students and staff experience. A lot of people think about student safety and all that. I really think about staff safety as well, because our staff aren't going to be effective if they don't feel safe. The good news is if you were to poll our staff, which we do poll our staff, safety on our staff surveys is always very high. Our staff members feel safe. Even our students and families, when we do our community surveys, some of you might have seen those and participated in them. When we do our community surveys, our safety in Citrus County schools is always scoring very high. Our parents feel that our schools are safe. Our students feel that our schools are safe, and our staff feels that they're safe. So I know that I know you guys are past our limit, but if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
I just want to
Yes,
say,
ma'am.
when I was growing up in the dark ages, we had air raid drills.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I know what they did to me, and I feel so bad for the kids now that you have to have these drills and that the classrooms need to be locked.
Yeah, it's just a different world that we're living in. You know, there's no easy way to say that. But you can't, in today's times, we just can't sit idle and not train. You know, that's to me, that's unheard of. You know, do we want that to happen? Do I think it's ever going to happen? Gosh, I hope not. In my career, I hope it never happens here in Citrus County. But is there a reality that it could? It could be. If you're not prepared, then shame on us for that. Yes, ma'am.
When we were in school, I could say 100 years ago, hiding our desk for a nuclear explosion, which wasn't going to
Yeah,
happen.
that's in Miami.
The aerial drills
Yep,
wasn't ever going to happen. These kids face shootings, that could happen.
that could happen.
That's
Right.
very challenging.
It's unfortunate.
When you say you've seen children as young as kindergarten now, health problems,
Mhm.
this has to all impact their mental health. Having active shooter drills, worrying someone's going to come in my classroom and shoot me. I don't even know how children are learning these days. I worry about our grandchildren who are in the school.
I meet with 3 groups of students from each high school once a month. And we always talk about safety because that we want to make sure. And I asked them after the last shooting in Tennessee, I said, how'd that make you feel? And all 3 groups said to me, Miss Himmel, we feel safe here. If something was to happen, we know what to do. We know where to go. We feel like we're okay. So I think when kids aren't prepared, I think that adds to their mental stress. And I'll just tell you that one day I picked up my granddaughter, first grader. She jumps in the car and she's laughing. She said, guess what? Somebody hit one of those white buttons today and it was an accident. And I said, well, what'd you do? She said, well, we knew what to do. And she told me where they got and what they were prepared to do. And it really made me feel good because the teacher talked to them, that it was an accident, didn't mean to happen. But the first graders knew what to do in case there was a true active assailant. So I will just give kudos to Chief Vincent because he has taken our safety to a level that I don't know that we would have ever reached if he hadn't have been there because as you can tell, he's very serious about what he does. But he trains our staff. He worked with them when we had the one at Crystal River. He immediately went over there. We retrained staff because what we don't want to have somebody push a button and they're afraid to do it next time. I don't know if I walked in school, something happened, how many times I'd push the white button. And they did give me a white button, so I do have one, but I agree with you, but I think it's what we do afterwards that helps our kids to make sure they know, you know, what we went through. But, you know, we had that shooting at LeCanto that year and those kids, even to this day, I talked to some of the kids that were in the classroom with them and they still have images of all that. So it does impact them. I won't play that down, but I think it's what we do and our staff does after it happens.
Thank you for all that you do.
Yes, ma'am.
I believe listening to this, that prevention is the most important thing. What systems, I guess you can't tell me, but I have to have confidence that you have systems in place that will keep the gun from getting into the school and at entrance points.
So that's kind of an interesting topic. So most people think that we should have metal detectors at our doorways. You know, I'm not so sure that I'm a firm believer of that. I hate to say it, but as a law enforcement officer, you try to think like bad guys, sometimes to think ahead of what they might be doing. I can tell you, unfortunately, if you have intentions of doing something, you'll find a way to get a gun on campus, whether it's through a metal detector. You could have all those things in place. And if you have the will and desire to do something, unfortunately, you can figure out ways to bypass most of those systems. Do I believe that we need gun detectors at the entrances of our schools? No, I don't. I really feel confident to say that I don't think that you'll find that we have a gun issue on our campuses in Citrus County. Are there counties in the state of Florida that I would worry about guns being on campuses? Absolutely, there are. There are some districts that are dealing with those issues, but I don't think that's an issue here for us in Citrus County. So having those detection points, the thing that people forget about with detections, because I've talked to districts that have tried to implement that, is it's not just having a metal detector at the door. You got to think, if you go to LeCanto High School, there's 1,600 students every day entering those doors. Who is going to screen and scan 1,600 students? Because every time a kid walks through there and the metal detector goes off, who's doing the pat down, who's checking the bag, and how long is that process going to take? So those are the things that people don't think about when we talk about what do we need at entry points and entry point screening. It's like going to the airport. Who's been to the airport? Could you imagine that line every day at every school? Going through that.
And
What do we do at entrance points?
well, may I add to that? That's a great question because we get asked that all the time. When you think about Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, I don't even mention his name, the dirtbag, what I call him, but when he came in through an open gate, looked like a gun bag. One of their, I forget what they called him, one of the teachers who was one of their patrol people, thought it was a gun bag, did nothing about it. Okay, so he saw that kid come in. When you think about the one in Tennessee, that woman shot the door open and came on in. So a metal detector wouldn't have stopped that. All of our schools have locked doors when you come in. They have to be, the person has to be buzzed in. When you think about Sandy Hook, he was the son of an employee. So they would have buzzed him in anyway because they knew him. So I'm a firm believer that we have to be proactive. I'm a firm believer that our kids need to know what to do and our staff needs to know what to do. But I also know if there's a metal detector at the front door, if he or she wants to bring a gun to school, they're going to figure out how to get it. They may throw it over the fence at night. They may hide it somewhere, somehow, some way, because they're evil people. And that's what we have to stay ahead of it. And, you know, when Dave talks about he has to think like a criminal, it's hard for us to think like criminals because we're not. But he's had enough experience that he knows what they're probably up to and how they're doing it. So I will never, ever say that it would never, ever happen in Citrus County. What I will tell you is that I believe we're prepared. Our staff's ready. Our kids are ready. Dave is on top of it. I just believe that we can control it the best we can.
And there's not just one door to get in school.
There's not one entrance in school, any schools across the nation, any of them. But, and we've locked doors and we've locked our classroom doors way before some of these other happenings. So we were and let me tell you, we took a heat for that because it's an inconvenience for our teachers and I admit that. But I think Chief Vincent told us one time, no assailant has ever gone in a classroom that's been locked.
That's a fact. No active assailant has ever made it through a locked classroom door, ever.
There's always
So-
a balance between freedom and safety,
Sure,
right?
there
And
is.
that's what, you know,
Right.
we have different opinions
The-
about where it should land.
The good thing is having staff buy-in in this process. You know, none of this stuff can happen if we don't have the support from our staff. If you go to any school in our morning, all of our entry points are staffed. All of our teachers are out of their classroom door greeting students. We have eyes and ears all over that campus. But as soon as that first bell rings, you are not getting on that campus. Those doors get locked. There's a single point of entry for you as a visitor to get to. So we do a really, really good job at that. Can we control that 20 minutes of mass entrance into and screening every student? No, I don't think there's a district that can sit here and say that they do that well every day. But, you know, having our staff trained, having them be our eyes and ears out there is our best case moving forward, I think, with that. Anything else?
If you ever have a question, you know how to find me or Chief Vincent. We're all open door policies. We'll share the good, the bad, and the ugly with you because you're going to find out anyway. But I just personally want to thank you on behalf of myself and the school system for your support of public education. You know, I'm passionate, Dave's passionate about it. We're all passionate about public education because I do believe that we build the whole child and we do the best we can. We do everything in our power to protect our teachers. I will tell you, some of them are scared to death because of the new laws, because you hear these horror stories in other districts. But I just want to thank you for your fight in Tallahassee and Washington for what you all do for us because we appreciate it. We need all the support we can out there to let people know the good things that go on in public education. We may not be able to meet the need of every student. I'm fine with that. We got great partnerships with our public or our private schools, church schools, our homeschool. We've got a great homeschool program that works in with our student services because we know one day those kids may come back and they would still be ours. So we're still going to fight for public education. And if we've got to go down to Titanic, we're going down to Titanic. We don't care. So we thank you all for what you do. Thank you. Thank you.
We want to thank you, Superintendent Himmel, very much, and your staff, and Chief Vincent. Thank you so much for coming here and enlightening us and bringing us up to speed of what's happening in our school systems.
And you all have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. You have a wonderful day.
I brought you.
Now that we've finished with our presenter, goodbye, Sam. I'd like to present to you one of our own, Rosemary Nillis. If you want to come up and give a few of your remarks.
Well,
You're next.
actually, real quick, yeah, they will. So I'm gonna follow along with something I wasn't planning on saying, but since this all came up, since Ms. Himmel and Dr. Hebert and Ms. Chief Vincent were here, the League of Women Voters of Florida Education Committee, of which I'm a part, have created a brochure to help parents understand what choices they're going to have this fall, because as she said, $8,000 to every family who would like to remove their child from public school. So they're basically paying families $8,000 apiece to take their kids out. Are they going to send them to a charter school? Well, that's not really covered. That's already free. But private schools, home schools, yes. So this is a chart that compares and contrasts teacher certification, elected school board, transportation, extracurricular, special needs, gender identity. If you know a family who will be making that choice, in other words, people who have kids in school, unless they know for sure they're keeping their kids in public school, they need to educate themselves. And we at the League, as we have said, we do support public education. We are strong supporters. Okay, but that wasn't really what I was going to say. I was supposed to do a legislative update, and we're just about out of time. Oh, sorry. Just about out of time, but I will just, I'm using the Chronicle. This is alphabetical order. These are laws that have passed. 6-week abortion ban, affordable housing. There are some things done, a budget, death penalty, now a decision by 8 of the 12 jurors. A lot of changes to election laws that are going to place additional restrictions on organizations like the League and other third-party voter registration organizations. Permitless carry has been passed, so Floridians, any one of us, will be able to pack heat without a permit. If we can get a gun through a background check, that's great, but we may be able to get our guns without a background check, depending on where we look. Immigration laws, as we've discussed, the LGBTQ issues, the school vouchers, and again, I've already talked about that. I just want to thank you all, and please watch our Facebook page, our newsletters. Members get the newsletters. Anyone can see our Facebook page. So I invite you all to look, and our website. There's Miss Kate, who does the website, and Miss Vicki, who does the newsletter. Chock full of information and up to date. Thank you. Thank you, Rosemary. And after Rosemary is finished, we have one item to mention. We have an announcement, and we have been asked to mention the Wear Orange Day, and I will read this to you and hope you enjoy it. We have been asked to make the following announcement concerning Wear Orange Day in Citrus County. Wear Orange is a national, nonpartisan event when community groups come together to draw attention to the toll of gun violence in our country. This year, the event is being spearheaded by the Citrus County, or I should say the Citrus Coffee Coalition. And this peaceful, nonpartisan event will take place, make a note, Saturday, June 3rd at the old courthouse in downtown Inverness. It will be at 11 o'clock in the morning. Individuals and community groups concerned about gun violence are invited to attend. Participants are asked to wear orange and bring signs. Check the Chronicle for more information on the event as it grows closer. And now I'd like to introduce Peg Primo.
Thanks. Just a quick announcement. You might have seen your email this morning. If you are a League member, League of Women Voters of Florida is joining with Floridians Protecting Freedom and a petition drive to get 900,000 signatures before the end of the year to get an amendment on the ballot, an amendment to the Florida Constitution protecting reproductive choice. So keep an eye on your emails. We'll start. We don't even have paper petitions yet, but that's coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Peg. Next, we want to introduce our Vice President, co-vice president, is that right? Oh, Kate
Me?
Vesco.
Yeah.
And I think you have some business to attend to.
Yeah, some exciting business. You know how to work this. I would like Jan to come forward, please.
Done.
You have done enough. No, I'm not gonna say nothing. But nothing that it is my pleasure
Oh, my goodness.
to give this to Jan Hall, who is a stalwart for the league. She was, she started when we reformed again, and let's see, when did we reform? 2013? 2013, and this says Certificate of Appreciation in grateful recognition of your continuing service and support. We hereby present Jan Hall with this certificate of appreciation for excellence and outstanding dedication on this 9th day of April, 2023, League of Women Voters of Citrus County.
Here, hold this, Joe. I'm troubles. Got it. So proud of you.
We wouldn't know what to do without Jan, I'll tell you.
That's true. That's so true.
Okay, I'll take it over.
Thank you. That was just. It's on there. We're almost finished with our meeting for today, but we'd like to remind everybody if they'd like to join together at a lunch today. We are gathering those who like to join us at Beef O'Brady's. It's up by where 486 and 44 come together by the Publix. If everybody would know where that is. So come and join us and have a little fellowship and some food. And we thank you all for coming. It's been a wonderful meeting. I just enjoyed having you all here. So we will say, see you next month in June on 1 minute, the 13th, June the 13th. Thank you again for coming.